The Dallas Cowboys have re-signed one very important part of the secondary. We will discuss who that is on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are discussing some comp picks that the Cowboys are now projected to get now that most of free agency is over. We're going to be discussing the ever-changing running back market now that A.J. Dillon is off the board. But we've got to start with the Cowboys' big free agent signing in their secondary. Cowboys have re-signed C.J. Goodwin. Just a huge move, Landon. No, we're not. They did do that, though, but that's not what we're getting to. Talking about Jourdan Lewis, who's back on a one-year deal. Not super surprising, but it is. I think it's very noteworthy for Dallas.
Yeah, I think you described it perfectly. It's not a huge surprise, but because of the role that Jourdan Lewis is going to need to play in this defense, it's an important signing. I think, you know, we talked about it on Twitter that, you know, when we had Luke Braun on, he came in and he was talking about, you know, some of the aspects of Zimmer's defense, and he talked about how the importance of the nickelback position and how it's a conduit of communication between the secondary and the second level of this defense, and that at times it has been a real problem for the Vikings defense when they didn't have a qualified player at that spot to kind of, you know, be that sort of glue guy for the defense to make sure that everyone's on the same page and coverages and that sort of thing. So I think having a tough, physical, smart presence who can kind of just make sure that the flow of communication is going where it needs to be. And then on top of that, you know, I mean, Zimmer, you know, likes to send blitzes. I wouldn't be shocked to see Jourdan Lewis come in on some blitzes, which is something that he has done exceptionally well in his time here. Just the kind of timing of everything. So, I said it on Twitter. I think that Jourdan Lewis's role as the nickel corner is, and his fit in this defense has increased. It's a much better fit, a much more important role. And I think Jourdan Lewis fits this role for this defense much, much better than he did with the Quinn defense, simply because it just takes a savvy physical defender more than a, you know, kind of shifty, quick cover guy that you want in the middle that's like going to be just like an exclusive man coverage slot guy. Jourdan Lewis is going to thrive, and I think he's going to be a huge part in kind of helping accelerate the learning process for the folks in the coming from the Quinn defense to the Zimmer defense.
Yeah, we should also mention there was several teams that were interested in Jourdan Lewis. We know that the Commanders were very interested. I'm shocked at the deal that the Cowboys got Jourdan Lewis on. It's a one-year deal worth $2.8 million guaranteed, but because of this it's basically this new contract. It's called the 4-year player qualifying contract. He's only going to count, I think, $1.3 million against the cap. And this is basically a rule put in so you can help keep some of these lower level players on your team that you drafted. Shocked because you just got a starting cornerback that is going to play a very important position for $1.3 million on your cap. I mean, it's just A+ signing by Dallas here.
Yeah, and as Marcus kind of pointed out to me before the show, this is also the same mechanism that Green Bay used on A.J. Dillon. We'll talk a little bit more about the running back market and what that means a little bit later. But I think, you know, this new mechanism does allow for you to sign these kind of mid-level, middle-class players to, you know, worthy contracts while also keeping the hit on your cap really low, which is important. So, yeah, I mean, it's an important signing for who the player was and who the person was playing that position, of course. Getting a veteran guy who's familiar with everything else about the Cowboys, I think is a good way to kind of get that transition going. And I can't wait to see how he works with Eric Kendricks to kind of, get that process of ingesting the Zimmer defense down and then spreading that out to the rest of the teammates. I think all of that's really important, but I think you pointed out the thing that really, really makes this a gold star A+ signing is he's going to cost you $1 million for a starting corner on this defense. And that's especially the way the contracts have been going with these nickelback corners you've seen so far. I think it's a real steal for the Cowboys. They got a very good player, a plus player at the position, especially considering the fit. For a very, very cheap price. And that's really, really, that's the benefit of being efficient in free agent. You find deals like this.
I just want to mention Jourdan Lewis' season last year. I thought for the most part, his play was underwhelming. And you can explain why, right? He was coming off that very serious foot injury that almost caused him to medically retire. You and I, listen, we were pretty vocal. Like, we didn't understand why the Cowboys decided to bring him back at his current contract last year. We thought that they could potentially cut him and use that money elsewhere. And for most of the season, I think we were right. But by the end of the year, the final 3 games, Dolphins, Lions, and then Commanders, I thought he was excellent. And at times he was their best defender. He was making a bunch of tackles in the run game. He had an incredible interception against Jared Goff. It finally felt like he was starting to look healthy. And now I got to assume that he's, a full year removed from that injury. Why couldn't he get back to where he was in 2021 and 2022 this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we saw at the end of last year was him getting back to that form, right? And him looking a lot more like the player that we had kind of known before. I mean, look, Jourdan Lewis has always been one of these guys who he doesn't give up a ton of plays. But will make plays, on occasion. And at the end of the year last year, it accelerated to a crazy rate. I mean, frankly, him and Donovan Wilson may have been your 2 biggest playmakers on defense
especially at the end of the
year.
Yeah.
So I think, our concerns last year with Jourdan was that he was a 28-year-old corner or whatever his age was that was coming off an injury that is known to crop back up, is known to suddenly kind of re-injure, a high chance of re-injury with a serious long recovery after that re-injury. Our concern was more that the Cowboys probably should have find a way to kind of keep him off the roster through injury mechanisms, right? Like, we wanted to kind of keep him on in-season PUP just to give him more time. And frankly, he played and he played, he didn't get you killed, but he didn't play great early.
No.
And I think as the season wore on, like, you started to see him get more healthy, started to see him get more comfortable. And by the end of the year, he was playing great. That's the kind of, positive, again, seeing hurt or older players play their best football at the end of the year, at the end of a season in which they were recovering from an injury. That, to me, is a very strong indication that, yes, they can get back to that previous spot that they had been before the injury. They just kind of needed more time away from the injury. So I'm hoping that's the case with Jourdan Lewis. I'm hoping that we've kind of gotten out of the danger zone of potential re-injury, because that still is a major concern. I keep thinking about Dez Bryant and what he went through. So I'm thrilled with the contract, thrilled that he's back. I'm hoping for continued health for him, because as he gets further and further away from this injury, the hope is that, we're not going to run into a re-injury situation.
Just to reset the cornerback room for the Cowboys. So you've got Deron Bland and Trayvon Diggs, who are projected to be your outside cornerbacks. And now you've got Jourdan Lewis as your slot. You feel really good about those top 3. And then at the back end of the roster, it's the Nahshon Wright, it's Eric Scott, it's Izzy Makamu, if you want to consider him a corner. It still feels like they're missing one more reliable option, whether that's Stephon Gilmore, whether that's going out and signing somebody else over the next week or so. We'll see. But don't you agree that it's like they need one more somewhat reliable guy as that 4th option?
Yeah, I mean, if they wanted to kind of get back to what they were thinking about last season, then yes, they still need one more guy. And frankly, again, like I'm not ruling out Stephon Gilmore. I think despite the fact that you get Jourdan Lewis and you like what he's going to be able to do at slot, like a situation where you could sign a corner and be able to fit it in your cap and make Jourdan Lewis not have to play 60 snaps a game or whatever it is, I think that's strongly beneficial. And again, you just simply can never have enough cornerbacks, like quality guys. If you can fit another guy on here that can go out there and be an asset in your defensive backfield, you absolutely do it.
I think there's several of those type of cornerbacks out there, like Stephon Gilmore, where if you happen to miss out on Gilmore and he ends up getting paid, like I think Patrick Peterson is pretty washed up, but that's somebody who played really well in Mike Zimmer's defense and kind of resurrected his career. Maybe you search for the next Patrick Peterson, a corner that's, early 30s that just wants to come in and be a part-time player. I won't be surprised to see the Cowboys look into the cornerback the market more over the next couple of weeks. But Lana, let's talk about another free agent who left this week, Neville Gallimore, and how that impacts the Cowboys comp pick formula. You'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar that you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar that you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of your first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. And baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern for the best MLB season preview, coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Be the first to get local insights from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right, Lana, let's start with the news that the Cowboys lost Neville Gallimore to the Miami Dolphins. He wasn't somebody that we were projecting the Cowboys to re-sign. What went wrong with Neville Gallimore in Dallas? Like, why did it never work?
It's a good question. I think looking back, like that transition from that Oklahoma defense really was tough for, several players that came out of it, specifically from the defensive line. Right. And I think part of that kind of has to do with that stance that they play in, that kind of frog stance. Well, and that's not maybe not necessarily the situation now, but at the time that he came out and some of these other guys that came out of the OU program, they were using kind of that frog stance that it was very different and kind of a different sort of mentality than what the Cowboys defense was doing, right? Like the Cowboys defense drafted Gallimore to be an upfield penetrator, right? They wanted to use all that athleticism that he had shown in the combine and he had shown on tape. They wanted to use that to have him, get his head into a gap, penetrate his way through, disrupt behind on the other side, line of the scrimmage. And it just took, I feel like it took Gallimore at least 2 seasons to just get his head around what he was being asked to do versus what he did in college. And because of that, it really kind of put him behind the 8 ball. And then on top of that, I think where he struggled was that when you started changing that stance and his techniques for getting up the field and off the snap, it changed all the angles for him as a run defender as well,
Mhm.
right? So like he wasn't even as stout as a run defender as he was previously because he's not catching bodies the way he was in OU and kind of using his hands to manipulate guys, right? Like so I just feel like it was a very big change in kind of what he was asked to do in college. It took him a really long time to kind of learn what he was doing. And then even by the time like it felt like he was comfortable and understood what he was being asked to do, you just still didn't see that athleticism kind of, show itself on a down by down basis for him. And there had just already been so much bad tape of him being washed out by double teams or taken for a ride in the run game. And I think you can probably get away with being a bad run defender like that if you're contributing as seriously as a pass rusher, and he just wasn't. And so at a certain point, it became, well, what is it that you're doing here other than just eating into snaps for us when we need to throw a body out there because our other defensive tackles are tired?
Remember that offseason where he tried to convince everybody that he gained 19 pounds of muscle in one
Yeah.
offseason? Yeah.
What was his body percentage? He said he was at like,
Yeah, I
he said he
know.
was at like 5% body fat or something like that too.
I know. I don't want a helmet scout because that's just a really poor way of doing things. However, you have to look at Oklahoma and like the Cowboys have drafted multiple defenders from Oklahoma, like that are like fantastic athletes
Yes.
that just didn't translate to the NFL, whether that's Gallimore or Charles Tapper. And I'm even looking at like some of the other players that have come out in recent years. Like Dallas really liked Kenneth Murray. That has not worked out at all in the NFL. Or
He has
Perry
no
on Win.
instincts. It's
No.
crazy. It's like this defense has all the answers for them, so they don't have to play instinctually, because all of these players came out and are all great athletes, but like it's like football is foreign to them. All the instinctual aspect of football is not something that comes naturally to any of those three players, I would say.
Yeah, and it was Ronnie Perkins and Brian Asamoah, who was a linebacker a couple years ago. It's been really weird to see like some of these guys get drafted inside the top 100 and really none of them work out. Now, again, I know they've completely changed the scheme and it's somebody different running everything now, and Alex Grinch is gone.
Yeah.
He's been gone for a couple of years, thank goodness. Yeah, so it's just weird. Now, I wanted to mention this in regards to the comp formula because actually right now Gallimore isn't going to impact the Cowboys comp picks because he signed such a low level deal. However, right now Dallas is projected to get 2 5th-round picks and a 6th-round pick, a 5th-round pick for I believe it was Tony Pollard, a 5th-round pick for Dorrance Armstrong, and then a 6th-round pick for Tyler Biadasz. And actually Biadasz and Pollard might be switched. I don't know.
Okay.
But it's very clear, like the Cowboys have this plan in free agency of we don't want to mess up this comp pick formula because that's how we reload our roster. So guys like Eric Kendricks,
Yeah.
who have been cut, or guys that are like been in the NFL for 10 plus years are who they're going to be targeting. And I think it's why they're so willing to try to re-sign their own rather than go out and spend money in free agency, because they really do value stocking up on these late day 3 picks.
Yeah, and again, I think that's why, it just on a separate note, that's why we keep kind of talking about the potential for them to, trade back if there's an option, right? Because they're missing a pick. They're going to want to refill that one as well. So I think this is a situation that the Cowboys have been trying to take advantage of for a while now, and that's, playing the comp pick game, being very specific about who they're signing so it doesn't mess up their formula. And I think for the most part, it's been positive, but at the same time, like there is, a downside to it. And that means you're obviously very selective about your free agent targets, and, the money that you're spending and that sort of things. And on top of that, I think there's also I tend to think that there are times when if you feel like, equal about the neutral about the player that is leaving your team, I wonder if the Cowboys, tie goes to the runner with those kind of situations,
Sure.
and they just push them out the door. They're like, we'll just take the comp pick and we'll start over.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So, I think that it's clear that the Cowboys are continuing down this path, continuing to try to make sure that they're going to get comp picks for the players that are leaving. And again, it is kind of limiting who they're targeting. But I think it's not been so detrimental that it's really thrown off anything that the Cowboys wouldn't be doing anyways, just because of the way that they spend money in free agency.
I generally agree with this philosophy when it comes to like getting 3rd and 4th round pick comp selections, because those picks actually have a lot of value, right? It's a little bit different when you don't want to spend money because you don't want to lose a 6th round comp pick that's going to be like in the 190s. And the player that you're going to be selecting in the 190s isn't all that different from the player that you're going to be getting in undrafted free agency. But I think for them, it's just the sheer number of picks. They just want to accumulate as many picks on day 3 as possible so they can take swings. And I also just think they're just not that interested in overpaying in free agency. You and I talked about, I think it was on Thursday, hey, which of these deals out there that have been made would you have done for the Cowboys? And we've only were able to come up with a few. It's not like there's values all over the place that we wish the Cowboys were, we wish they would have been in on those deals.
Well, look, I mean, here's the thing. The comp picks, even if they're the 5th and 6th round picks, that's still beneficial, especially if the Cowboys continue to do what they did last year, which is to flip some of these lower round picks for veteran players, to trade them for. That was the kind of aspect that they not added because they've done this before, but they started to kind of lean back into a little bit more, is using some of those late round picks to flip for known starters, veteran starters.
Sure. That's the value.
Yeah. So I think it's a good strategy to continue to do the comp pick thing, but only if you're also, combining it with the, taking advantage of the market inefficiency that exists with the trade market in low round, late round draft picks and known quantities with known quantity veterans that have contracts that their current team are trying to move off from.
All right, let's talk about the running back market. We've referenced A.J. Dillon, who has re-signed with the Packers. What's left and what will the Cowboys do? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a number 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's number 1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That is $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who you think is going to win it all. Listen, I'm just telling you right now, I'm betting on Iowa in the women's bracket because I love watching Caitlin Clark. I don't even care if it's a bad bet. I just want to root for Caitlin Clark in Iowa. So that's what I'll be doing. So go visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are discussing the running back market in free agency, which pretty much just dried up. Our top free agents available now are Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Rico Dowdle. We've got Damian Harris coming off a neck injury. Ezekiel Elliott is still out there. What do the Cowboys do now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, nothing's really changed. I think other than who's available, I think they're still just trying to find a kind of B team guy, not a B team guy, I shouldn't say that, but like a B to their A and B, right? Like a guy that is their running back 2 is going to get a significant amount of carries every game. And I think that, you're still going into this situation planning on getting the juice in the draft. So the names here are not great, but that's okay. Like, I mean, the guys that the Cowboys were shopping for weren't the great names. They weren't the Derrick Henrys or Pollard was a consideration, but the Barkleys and those kind of guys. So the names that are left are still appropriate, I think, for what they're looking for. They're not perfect situations, right? Like if Dobbins was healthy, he wouldn't still be available. If Harris didn't have a pretty severe neck injury, I don't know that he's available,
No.
So there's clearly warts here. And then on top of the warts, there's a huge dearth of running backs. So these guys are what's left. And it's not like they're all so terrible. Every single one of these guys that you've named, is qualified to be a running back as part of committee as a starting committee, right? So to me, I think you just kind of look at these individual situations. You check out the medical situations of the two guys that you just mentioned specifically, because I think that those are the two more talented guys, right? That I think that their warts are injury based, right? And then you go in knowing, hey, the jewel of my running back class or my running back room is going to come out of the draft.
Yeah.
So and you're working towards cobbling together a group that can share the load here as a unit. And so I think you just kind of have to just sort through what's left, see what's left on the deals. The money is going to dictate some of this, because some of these guys are going to get paid more than what you expect them to get and what you expect that they deserve. And you just see what fits for you. And ultimately it's not going to matter a ton who it is, because, running back production ultimately ends up kind of being a wash, especially in this spot. So I think as long as you're getting somebody who can be reliable, can be good in pass protection, can, if you need them to, take the entirety of the load for multiple games and not, fall off a cliff. And I think that that's a low enough bar that all of these guys that are currently on here should be able to clear that.
So Stephen Jones said something interesting yesterday at the Kid Rock thing, whatever that was. I don't know.
It was the PBR thing. I'll have you know. The fact that Kid Rock was there, that's what was weird.
PBR, is that like that's a beer?
It's
right?
it's bull riding. Yeah, professional bull riding.
Bull riding, not the beer. Yeah. He said that there's going to be some really good players cut in the next couple of weeks that could come and help our team. My brain instantly went to the running back position.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I looked at some of the names like Jamal Williams, who we mentioned a couple of times. I think he could be a cap casualty with the Saints, who are always dealing with some cap problems. I think the Panthers could end up cutting Miles Sanders. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears move on from Khalil Herbert. And I know none of these names are super exciting, but they don't have to be. Can one of those guys come in and be, a 10-touch player a game on top of a third-round pick at running back? Absolutely. I do think this is a position that's going to have more talent on it, or in it, once we get a little bit closer to the draft. So I'm not panicking because the Cowboys don't have a starting running back on the roster of all the positions on the team.
Yes,
like
exactly.
Running back is the one where I feel okay going into the draft without a clear-cut start. Like it's okay.
I'm okay going into I'm almost okay going into the season without knowing who the starter is. I mean, running back is one of those positions. We've talked about it, multiple times. There are windows that you have, depending on the position, there are windows that you have to get these guys at different points. Obviously, the draft, the free agent market. But I think the other window that we forget about is that late in training camp before the cuts windows. And honestly, that is where this specific type of player is like, you'll have a whole pick of the litter of these guys. So they are certainly not in a situation where they have missed out or anything like that. There is going to be still plenty of opportunity for qualified running back candidates to get a job and for the Cowboys to figure that out. They don't even necessarily have, like you said, they don't even necessarily have to sign one of these guys going into the draft, right? Like there may be a point, like we have talked about several times, that the running back market just stops because it's like, okay, these are the guys that are getting signed before the draft. Everyone else is likely to wait until the other side. And if that's the case, that's fine too, because again, there will be a whole other round of running back cuts, running backs being released because in reaction to the draft that happened, right?
Yes.
So there's still plenty of opportunity to get quality-ish running backs simply because it's the position that there is the most depth in the NFL. There's just always going to be a number of these guys available on the street. This is not offensive tackle. This is not, a defensive end.
It'll be fine.
There's opportunities to find starter level quality players 365 days a year at running back.
And the last thing, and this is going out to all you Cowboy fans who say, look what happened in 2015 when they didn't sign DeMarco Murray. Listen, I'm telling you, the running backs were good that year. I don't care that it was Joseph Randall and Darren McFadden. Darren McFadden ran for 1,000 yards that year, and he didn't even play like the first month of the season. The reason why those guys didn't end up having the numbers that DeMarco Murray had was because your starting quarterback played 3 games and your number 1 receiver got hurt in week 1. Like, it was actually incredible that Darren McFadden ran for 1,000 yards. And if you remember Joseph Randall early in that season, he was awesome until he went off the rails. So stop using that 2015 season to rationalize why the Cowboys need to go out and get a running back. That's all.
Also,
That's all
almost 10 years ago. It's not like the NFL and the landscape of the NFL hasn't changed drastically since 2015. So,
all right, I feel better. Again, Darren McFadden looked pretty good, 1,000 yards, despite not playing the first few weeks of this game. All right, that is it for today's show. I need to stop talking about the 2015.
You got it. It's just going to make things worse for you.
No, it's one of the least enjoyable football seasons of my life. It's just go follow the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Go check us out on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there. Go download download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Go follow Landon at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy your weekend, and we will be back next week getting you ready for round 1 of the NFL draft. We got some cool profiles coming up, so make sure you guys are tuning in for that.